Welcome back to Seven Figure Flipping Podcast. Normally you would see Adam be doing the intro, but I get privileged to do the intro today. I'm Dr. Sheri Fluellen. I am one of the members in Seven Figure Flipping. So I am hosting and Adam is co-hosting today on the podcast. We have a topic that I think is relevant to all of you, although some of you may not really have thought about it much. And we're going to explore this from my perspective and from Adam's perspective, and would love for you to just listen to our perspectives and our experiences and what we've seen to see how you can take those perspectives into your own investing network.
I love it. Yeah. Now, this is something you and I have talked about a lot just offline together. So I think it's a really important topic. And honestly, I have done a lot of thinking about this, but I never really knew how to approach it to make an impact in this space until you and I had some discussions, and now we can do some stuff together where we can make an impact on this.
So you might be wondering, what is the topic? So we're going to unpack for you a little bit today about the gender differences in real estate investing. And I feel like we need to have a caveat or a disclaimer first that I'm going to be speaking to the female perspective. However, my experiences, my beliefs, my values are not necessarily, obviously, going to be exactly the same as every other female investor. But I think it's a great place to start, just as Adam's perspective is not going to be exactly the same as every other male real estate investor. But at least this gives an opportunity for us to set the groundwork for being able to think about things and put ourselves in a different position around, what is it like to jump into real estate investing? And what is it like to walk into even a room of real estate investors, such as where we're at right now, which is in Cancun with a seven-figure flipping mastermind. What might this experience be like that's different for me as a female investor versus Adam or some of the other male investors here? I think this will be interesting.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about it. And for context, I think there are maybe, just off of the top of my head, 5 or 6 women leaders in here in the room. Does that sound about right? Probably maybe 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Compared to, 40 or 50 men investors who are leading their companies.
Yeah. So I would say 10 to 15%.
Right.
Somewhere around there. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's about right. And that's kind of the context here and why there is potentially a difference in what those challenges may be.
Yeah. And even in that, I think it's interesting because you've got like myself, who's a female investor, but my husband's also here and he invests with me. And then there's another step. And I think another layer of complexity for the women that are choosing to real estate invest that don't have a spouse in the area, or maybe they don't even have a spouse at all. And they're doing this completely on their own. Some single moms are doing this, which is amazing. So I think there's different layers and levels of complexity and stories when we're talking about women investing.
Yeah. So you have some hard questions that you're going to ask, and then we're going to go through that.
Absolutely. What is your worst bias about women in real estate?
I don't. So I'm okay. There's another caveat here. My partner, one of my partners, is a woman.
Yes.
But she's not wired like most women. Okay, so generally speaking, the bias would be women are emotional, or they're not going to be as savage as they need to be when push comes to shove. But that's just not true in our office, because I'm kind of the pushover and Lindsay is the savage one in our office. So I don't see it that way, but I do know that that's the bias. It's she's not going to negotiate hard against me, or you just kind of feel like you have an advantage. But I don't know that. I know that that's not true because I get destroyed in the office all the time.
So here's what's interesting. That perspective might be a common conception that men have towards women, and I think even women might have about themselves. what I have noticed, which is interesting, is that some of the men that I connect with, wholesalers, contractors, I perceive that they treat me differently, but not necessarily in a bad way. So I had a wholesaler call me 3 weeks ago. I met him once about a month ago, or it was a couple weeks before he called me. I met him at a meetup in another back where I live. And I brought my son actually to this meetup. He's a 15-year-old and he's in Teen Tycoons, which is kind of a subset of seven-figure flipping. So I brought him to the meetup. It was just me and my son, and then, with a group of other investors, and we had great conversation. He calls me up in a week to 2 weeks later and he says, "Hey, I've got this deal. I wanted to know if you're interested. I'm coming to you first." I never what the heck? Why is he bringing this to me? I literally just met him. So my interpretation is there was something memorable about me in that environment. And maybe it was because I brought my son. Might also have been because I was the only female that was at the meetup. But I've noticed that there is a softness and a desire to help that I perceive I get, that I think if my husband, who's very much a bull in the china shop.
Yeah. JP.
I don't think people treat him the same way. So one of the things that I feel like is extremely important, and how I have chosen to function as a female in the real estate investing space, is instead of seeing my small percentage of representation as a negative, I look at it as a positive. How can I use that to my advantage? I've been to a lot of syndication conferences. I walk into the room. I am very aware that I am a long-haired blonde, and 90% of the men, I'm one of few females, but 90% of the men are darker skinned, probably have an Indian accent, or they're older white men. And so I stand out, and I could choose to use that as a story to just not go to these events because I stand out, or I could use it as a story of I do stand out. They're going to remember me, which has been proven to correct, that I will meet somebody. I will meet somebody later. So one story was I was at a syndication conference. I suppose there was probably about 350 people at this conference. I did have a very minor, quick speaking from the stage opportunity, which I had. And then over a year later, I was at a mastermind in Hawaii, and there was about 20 of us there. And a gentleman was there, and he's like, "Oh, I remember you from," and he remembered me out of 350 people there and multiple speakers. I vaguely remembered him, but to me, that was a great example of how I stood out and how he remembered me, rather than me being intimidated because I was, super obvious and kind of stood out in the crowd. So I think.
Well, let me ask you a hard question, though. So, because there's also the side, and actually this came out in a conversation last night about real estate agents, and I'm naive. I've been married for 20 years. The Robinson group, Kyle and they do a lot of agent stuff, kind of like you and JP. And I said, "Do you think these agents sleep with their clients?" And they said, "Yes, absolutely." And I was like, "What? There's no way. Are you kidding me? I've never seen anything like that." And they're like, "Yeah, man, because you're a married dude in bed by 9 p.m. every day, not part of it." But there's a perception of women that they would do something like that to get ahead. And then, and probably many times incorrectly. I'm sure sometimes they're true, but many times incorrectly. You worry about reputation, because when I talk to Lindsay about this kind of stuff, reputation is really important to her. She never wants to be put in a position where even perceived that something like that could happen.
Yeah.
I may have just taken us down a crazy rabbit hole, but I feel like that's a concern that you would have to have, potentially being in a room like that I would never have to have.
Right. I do want to make a statement. I do sleep with my client because he's my husband.
Yes.
Great question.
He's your best client.
Yeah, he's my best client. I agree with Lindsay that I value highly my reputation, and it's the most important thing to me is my reputation. And I don't think my gender is why I think that way. I think that's just a value that I have.
But do you think it's harder for women, though? Do you think this is something that women have to worry about even more than men in a lot of cases?
There are different considerations that we need to have. So, okay, the gender differences has come out even since we have been in Cancun. So I'll speak to this in a slightly different context, but it is absolutely relatable to this context. I have 4 teenagers that are here in Cancun with us. 3 of them are girls, 1 of them is a boy. And as we have set, as my husband and I have given them boundaries and rules around while we were here, because we're not watching them the entire time, it's been interesting because my thought process around what I let my son do, for example, he walked another one of the teenage girls back to her room at 11 o'clock at night, and then he walked back to our room by himself because he had dropped her off. I don't want my girls out at 11 o'clock in this resort by themselves. I require them to be paired up. So I think there is some reality as to the vulnerability of a guy versus a girl. And one of my daughters, I happened to see that she was at one of the bars here being, you can still get non-alcoholic drinks, but she was standing at a bar and there was 5 other teenage boys that were kind of around her with her, talking with her. And as soon as I saw that, I stopped, kind of hid behind a little bit and was watching through the window. And I stayed there for a good 20 minutes just observing because she doesn't understand the vulnerability position she's in. She's still learning about that.
Yeah.
But I think it highlights that there are cautions as a woman that we need to take just to be safe, to protect our reputation, to be smart and wise in life in general. So why wouldn't that also be present in the business field, in kind of in the business arena? So
yes, it is.
So absolutely. If I'm at a networking hour with, a bunch of real estate investors and they're primarily men, I'm going to be very careful about what I drink. I'm definitely going to limit my alcohol intake if I have any. I'm going to be very cognizant of where my drinks come from so that, somebody that has ill intent isn't able to take advantage. And I'm definitely not going to put myself in a position where there could be the appearance that I'm doing something that's not appropriate as a married woman.
Right.
And so I think there absolutely is wisdom in how a woman acts versus maybe a man. Just, speaking real. Another
part of this, I'm kind of got you here in the chair with me. So I'm so fascinated because we talked about, how do we get more of our awesome women on stage and in front of people, because you guys literally are some of the best business owners in the community. When I think about, Lindsay and you and Anna and Amanda Howe and all these women who are just absolutely dominant at what they're doing. That's kind of where the conversation started. But then I started peeling the onion back and the stuff we're talking about now, it's actually harder for you to succeed in business than it is for me. That's my determination. It's I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Maybe I do, but I definitely don't. I should worry about my reputation, but I'm not.
Somebody might want to roofie you, right?
They certainly might. And obviously that would not be good, but it's not something I think about.
Right.
Right.
You're right.
And it's not even that. It's I watch some of the women and their preparation for things. They prepare better than a lot of the men. When they do get up and present, it's usually better because they know, it appears to me that their margin for error is less than ours. Mm. Or at least perceived that way. When I watch Lindsay prep for things as opposed to me. Lindsay is extra prepared, and it's not because she's detail oriented, but because she feels like her margin for error is less and her reputation is so important to her, where I show up and I'm what's the topic? Let's roll. Which maybe that's just me anyways. Kind of like this podcast.
Right. I think there definitely can be as a woman an extra mile that we need to go to prove that we are as capable as men in a male dominated arena. Definitely, I think at times to the detriment. Prior to real estate investing, I built a mental health practice, and at the peak, I think I had about 18 employees. We would have a Thursday morning. We would have like an agency staff meeting, and probably half of the times, maybe not quite half, but probably about half, I would shed a tear at some point during the staff meeting, because for a variety of reasons. Maybe I was presenting on some topic that I was super passionate about, or I was giving kudos to somebody that I just was super proud of. Like, there for a variety of reasons. And then there were also times where we had some really tough stuff going on in the agency, and I was working hard at trying to fix things. I had to fire some people and just all of that stuff. And I just was overwhelmed emotionally, and I'm trying to communicate transparency and all of this stuff during staff meetings. And there would be times where I would shed tears. And
as opposed to me, who I would have to it would take a lot to make me cry.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't compartmentalize.
You already know me. You know me so well. But that can be perceived as weakness.
It can be perceived as
I think it usually is perceived.
It usually is, but
and guys are afraid of emotion. Like, is this person going to be crying all the time? Like, I can't handle that. Like, They don't want to work with people like that, though. So how do we talk to me about why that's actually healthy and why that's important?
Well, for me, it's healthy because it's allowing me to be me. It's allowing my emotions to come out. And I think that's healthy. And at times, it could push somebody away. I think for me, it's how I react to my own tears and how I speak to them and how I push through them. It's not like I'm sobbing inconsolably, unable to talk or think.
Right.
But rather, I speak to what's going on and explain it in the context of how important this is or how impactful it is. And I choose to believe that that demonstrates genuineness as a leader. It demonstrates my passion, my commitment, all of those things which I think any man would appreciate coming from a leader. And so I think there's an opportunity to just be yourself as a female. Own and accept that in general, we tend to be a little more emotional. And how can we use that to the advantage of our investing to increase the relationships that we're fostering and all of those things. And if you get turned off because in a conversation, I'm a little bit emotional, then you're probably not the right person to be doing deals with.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I've learned, so I've been fortunate to be not just learning and studying leadership specifically, but practicing it for over 20 years as a military service member, which it's all about leadership for us. Like, the whole 20-year career was all about just being better. The best leaders in the entire Department of Defense were the ones who were willing to be vulnerable at times. And for men, that's really, really hard to do. I don't know why that's the case, but it's probably because a lot of us do compartmentalize, and we're just future focused all the time. And we're protectors and providers, and there's this altruistic, like, even for me in my own household, I'll tell you this is true. Like, I don't feel like there's room for my emotions because I'm the one who's I'm the even one, right? Like,
You're the rock.
We're the rocks of our families. Like, everybody else can have chaos and emotions, but we just keep it cool at all times. So I think that also goes to business a lot. Like, I'm not going to be high or low. I'm going to see the problems and solve them. And that's kind of how I choose to lead. But I do think it's important, and I do try to be vulnerable at times. And it doesn't mean like I'm crying on your shoulder, but I'm just admitting my mistakes, owning those things, talking about what I'm going to do to get better. And, just to know that there's a chink in the armor. I'm not like perfect as the leader of an organization, And I think that really helps connect. It really helps us connect with our team members too.
Yeah. And there's one other area that I would just love to touch on a little bit, and that I think it can be a superpower, but it also, I've just recognized the difference between my husband and myself as we are both working on our real estate investing and real estate. And it's that I kind of have to multitask more than my husband.
Interesting.
Because, so when I look at my day, just as an example, my husband and I both have offices in our home. I also have kids, 3 of my 4 homeschool. And so during the day, I'm in my office and I've got kids knocking on my door, popping in, telling me random stuff, showing me like how well they did their makeup or hair that more. Like, I'm the nurturer. And so they are constantly coming to me for things, and just to touch base and to share something with me or whatever, or I have to drive kids here and there during the day. Whereas my husband, he's got an office. It is further away from the kids in the home, and they don't really come to him for all of the touch base things during the day. And
mostly nothing.
Pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
Unless
they'll bypass us to come to you.
Seriously.
And say, Mom, can I?
And so
it actually drives me nuts that my kids do that. I'm like, dude, what am I, chopped liver over here?
Right. No, my kids literally do that. They will not tell my husband something. And I know why, because I respond to them in a more positive way from their perspective, a more loving, nurturing, interested way, because I want to be that kind of mom. And so my ability to move things forward, and when I look at you and what you do and how much traction you've gotten, part of me is a little bit jealous, because I'm like, oh, I wish I could move that fast. Now, I can move faster and more efficiently than I currently am. So I definitely have room for improvement, which I am actively working on, and I've gotten some great ideas and epiphanies on from having been in this mastermind. But I feel like there's fewer speed bumps for my husband, or, for other men who have wives that are taking care of all that thing. So I think there's potentially a different idea of what success looks like, and the goals that we are working on achieving, or maybe the route to get there looks different. And being able to speak to that, I think is valuable, so that women don't.
Now wait, is it the success looks different for you in your house flipping business than it does me? Or just like the way you're crafting your business because you are a husband-wife team?
I think both could be true.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, for example,
because I see it as I'm obviously naive in a lot of ways, but I just see this whole, I mean, first off, like, how we are. Like, we love family. We love our faith in this community. We believe in abundance. Like, there's not a person in here who wouldn't open up their P&L or, oh my gosh, you want to know about something I'm doing? Maybe giving you way more than you could even chew on. But I think that it's a meritocracy. Like, I don't see male, female personally. I just see, oh, you're kicking butt in your business, or you're not doing what you said you were going to do.
Yeah.
And that has no gender to me. It's like,
right.
You're either doing what you say you're going to do, or you're not.
Right. So where I've noticed potentially the difference, and you may not fall into this, but where I've noticed between my husband and I, which is where I do notice kind of how some of these things butt heads. If you ask my husband what he would love our business to look like in a year, it's doing like a ridiculous number of deals. When he says that, in my mind, I'm like, how the heck am I supposed to, because I'm the one doing.
Because it's going to fall. A lot of it's going to fall on you. But he knows that, but doesn't see it.
So him, it's like the bigger, the better.
Yes.
Right?
I love JP.
Well, for me, it's not the bigger. Like, I don't want to do more deals. I want to do more profitable deals, because that is more manageable.
Me too.
Which allows me to be able to still be present with my kids and giving them my time and energy. But he is just thinking like, grunting and like he wants to drag more.
JP smash.
Right. So again, not that every man is like him and every woman is like me, but I appreciate his desire to kill, hunt, and drag home. I think that's how God's wired him. And I think I'm wired differently. It's just a very drastic
But that's the norm. you're literally were built to make small humans and then nurture them
Right.
until they could like go off onto their own. Like that's not uncommon. I mean, that's another challenge that we haven't really discussed. But like I work with Lindsay, she's basically, she's a single mom, obviously co-parenting. She's it's way harder for her than it is me.
Right.
And it's way harder for my wife than it is me because she has inherent responsibilities that don't show up on the scoreboard.
Yeah.
And that can be, if not recognized, I found that can be, build a lot of resentment, right? It's like, well, yes, I'm doing all this, but also I'm keeping small humans alive.
Right.
And they're like going to school and stuff and getting good grades, It's like, that's a whole job in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unless you're a woman in the industry and you don't have any kids, which is a little less common to see.
Yeah.
But if you're a mom, that's like a whole different ball game.
Right. Because my responsibility, I believe, is my kids need me first. Like they will never have another mom.
Right.
I am their only mother. There are other investors, there are other business owners, but my primary role it needs to be my kids. And so as I go throughout my day and I'm challenged by competing interests with, some of the real estate investing goals I have and the plans I had for the day. I mean, my biggest frustration is I've got these grand plans, strategies, I try to schedule things out and then stuff comes up with my kids. My son broke his middle left toe.
What's wrong with him? How do you break a middle left toe?
Yeah, he was moving a piece of granite from a lamp and it fell like a couple feet down and he wasn't wearing shoes. And anyway, all of that. And it's like, okay, so now I'm taking him to the orthopedic doctor to,
Well, you're the default, right? Not JP. JP's not taking him.
Well, actually, so I told my husband, I said, you need to take him to the urgent care was first, but I have to tell him to do that.
Right.
But because
it's not inherent to us.
Right.
We just kind of wait to see if you want us to.
Right. I was fortunate to where like I had some stuff I was working on and so I'm like, you take him. And I ended up taking him to the other because I do prefer to take my kids to the doctors. Like that is my nurturing desire. So trying to balance all of that is just an interesting challenge as a female investor.
So I know we've been on this one for a minute. Let's
land the plane.
Let's land the plane. I think that there's a lot of women out there who see these male-dominated rooms, probably think like, well, I've got this mom stuff. I got all this other stuff going on. But I sit here next to some giants in terms of women in business, and you're, in my opinion, very, very successful flipping houses, buying rentals, like all these things. You got your retail business with JP, like it's very impressive. You're doing it. It can be done. What would you tell those women who maybe are like, I feel a calling to do this, but I don't know how I could ever do it with all the things I have going on, right? Because that's how it feels, overwhelming, I'm sure.
It is possible, and you can absolutely do it. My encouragement to you is accepting and embracing that it's probably going to look different than a lot of the people around you, especially if you're only or primarily around men investors. Hear their stories, take their suggestions, their strategies, their tactics. But if you can bounce ideas off of other female investors or even just other female entrepreneurs, because investing is basically it's a niche of being an entrepreneur. Be around other women entrepreneurs to understand that these challenges, the feeling pulled in multiple directions, all of that stuff is normal and you're not going crazy. And that doesn't mean that you're going to fail and not succeed. It will normalize things for you and help you see that you can still do it. It just might look differently. And I think just knowing that it's okay and it's normal and it's still possible can be just a huge sense of relief. And I don't know, for me, it's joy, knowing that, especially if I feel God's calling me to something like investing, which I do feel right now in our life. I feel like that's God's calling on me in addition to my family life and whatnot. if I feel like God's calling me to something, but then I feel like I can't, or how could I, and feel discouraged, that is very discouraging. So just being able to embrace the who, not how, for lack of, getting around other women and understanding how they do things and using that as a blueprint to moving forward, I think can be helpful.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I'm Adam. This is Dr. Sheri Fluellen, and thanks for coming and listening to this podcast. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.